Hello, my name is Maya Green, and 3 days ago, my own mother threw my suitcase down the stairs and screamed, "Get out, Bloodsucker!" right before slamming the door in my face. I didn't scream back. I didn't cry. I walked away, because sometimes the only thing louder than betrayal is silence. The gravel under my shoes crunched louder than I remembered, or maybe it was the silence around me that made every sound feel exaggerated. My breath fogged in the cold air, but my palms were slick with sweat. I didn't feel cold, not physically. There's a kind of cold that seeps in when you realize the door that's just slammed behind you isn't going to open again. I stared at the suitcase beside me, the same one I'd used when I left for college, back when my mother told me I'd be the one to make it. Back then, it was filled with ambition. Now it held disappointment, shame, and a stack of resumes that no one had responded to. I had packed it carefully this morning, still believing, foolishly, that I would only need a few days of grace. Then the door opened. Mom didn't step outside. She just leaned out enough for her voice to slice through the air like a wire. "Bloodsucker," she hissed, as if the word had been waiting to be spoken. "Get out." Dad followed, slower, more deliberate. He didn't yell. He didn't look at me. Just walked past and kicked the suitcase like it offended him. It toppled sideways, wheels scraping the concrete. Neither of them asked why I was laid off. No one asked how I was holding up. It was as if the second I stopped bringing money through that front door, I'd stopped being family. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mouth felt filled with sand. My heart pounded not from fear, but from something worse, humiliation. A part of me still expected them to call me back, to say they were joking, that this was just stress talking. But they didn't. They watched me like I was a stain on the porch. I bent down, picked up the suitcase. My hand shook as I grabbed the handle, and when I opened the front pocket to check my ID, something else hit me. My health insurance card was gone. I checked again. Nothing. With my stomach twisting, I pulled out my phone and called the insurance provider. "Yes, ma'am," the woman on the other end said. "This policy was used last Thursday. Routine checkup and labs." I hadn't been to the doctor in 6 months. "Who signed in?" I asked, already knowing the answer. There was a pause. Then, Margaret Green, relationship listed as spouse. My mother had used my name again. I ended the call and just stood there, the phone still in my hand, staring at my suitcase like it might answer for everything. "You done loitering?" Mom barked. She was now standing fully in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp with disgust. "Go cry to your HR. This isn't a charity house." Dad, still not meeting my eyes, muttered, "You're not a kid anymore. Grow up." I didn't cry, didn't scream. My tongue stayed glued to the roof of my mouth like it knew anything I said would be used against me. I just rolled the suitcase upright again. I turned without a word, but the wheels made noise. That was the thing. Every crack in the driveway echoed. Every pebble popped under the rubber. I couldn't even leave quietly. I remembered something then. Years ago, I was 12. I'd come home clutching a certificate for top grades, excited, proud. My mom was on the phone with a neighbor. I waited patiently, silently, until she hung up. I handed her the paper. She glanced at it. "Your brother made the football team today," she said, smiling. "Isn't that great?" No hug, No fridge magnet, just a nod towards someone else's accomplishment. That was the first time I realized I was invisible. This was the second, but this time I wasn't walking away feeling small. I wasn't looking for a pat on the back. I was walking away to remember who I was before they forgot me. The motel door clicked shut behind me with a heaviness that felt final. Inside, the room was dim and dry, its corners shadowed like it had secrets of its own. The bed groaned when I dropped the suitcase beside it, like even it didn't want the weight of me. The walls were off-white, tired. So was I. I sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the muted TV. The silence was thick, but not quiet. It pulsed with things unsaid. I reached for my phone, not expecting comfort, just distraction. That's when it buzzed. A link. No message. Just a title. Family Ties, Episode 42, When Siblings Turn Toxic. I shouldn't have clicked, but I did. The voice filled the room like a wound tearing open. She never supported us. Not once. She just wanted control. Everything was about her. She was bitter, selfish, always the victim. It was my brother, my baby brother. He was calm, rehearsed. He used words like toxic, emotional manipulation, and entitlement. I'd heard those words before, in therapy, in documentaries about trauma cycles. But I never thought they'd be used against me. By someone I used to spoon feed mashed bananas. The comment section scrolled by, fast and brutal. She sounds awful. No wonder they kicked her out. What a burden to carry. I didn't cry. I just stopped breathing for a second. I stared at the screen like it had punched me in the chest. My brother, my family, strangers were building a version of me with scraps of his resentment. And no one, not even one voice, was there to say, that's not who she is. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. My mind reeled. Memory doesn't ask for permission. It just barges in. I saw myself, 24, working double shifts to help him pay for that overpriced certificate program he swore would change his life. I remembered sneaking extra money into his account after Dad called him a failure. I remembered the night he cried outside my door, and I sat with him until the sun came up. None of that made the podcast. He'd rewritten the past without me in it, erased the sacrifices, and worse, replaced them with lies. That's where it all started. I put my phone down. My chest ached in a way I couldn't explain, like grief and betrayal had decided to cohabitate. I looked around the motel room, bare, forgettable, just like they wanted me to be. The knock on the door made me jump. No one should have known where I was. I didn't speak. I just walked to the door and looked through the peephole. No one there. Then the phone rang again. Caller ID, Carla Delaney. It took me a second. Carla, my old roommate, the one who loaned me $3,000 to help cover my brother's tuition years ago. Money I paid back in silence. I answered, voice flat. Hey. Madeline, she said, soft. I just listened to the podcast. My heart clenched. I braced myself for more judgment. You okay? She asked. I didn't know how to answer that. You never asked me to repay you, she continued. But I still have the receipts, just in case you ever need them. Something in me broke, not from pain, but from relief. Someone remembered. Someone had proof. I didn't say much, just thanked her and hung up. I sat back on the bed, Open my laptop. The screen lit up, and so did the past. Folder, finances, family. I clicked. There they were, PDFs of transfers, screenshots of emails begging for payment extensions, text threads of promises that were never fulfilled. It was all there. The invisible years I spent holding everything together while being told I was too much. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. I scrolled through them one by one, not crying, just documenting. Like an archivist of pain, I open a new folder. Evidence, truth. Not for revenge. For memory. For protection. For me. I clicked Save All. Then I whispered into the quiet room, into the only space that hadn't betrayed me. He erased me, but he left behind my fingerprints. I didn't sleep. I lay on top of the covers, shoes still on, my eyes tracing the ceiling as if it held answers. My laptop sat open beside me, casting a dull glow across the room, like a night light for the emotionally wounded. Every time I closed my eyes, his voice played again, my brother's voice, smooth, confident, weaponized. He'd erase me out loud. But I was about to find out they'd already done it silently. By sunrise, I found myself opening the website of our family business, Green & Company. The name hadn't changed, but everything else had. On the homepage, a glossy banner photo beamed across the screen. My father, my mother, my brother, smiling, posed, as if nothing had ever cracked beneath them. The caption read, "A proud legacy built by our only son." I stared at those words until they stopped making sense. Our only son. I wasn't a footnote. I wasn't a partner. I wasn't even a memory. There was no meet the team page for me. Not a single trace. Not in the Our Story section. Not in the timeline. Not even in the early photos I knew I had taken with my own damn camera. Every picture I remembered had been cropped, replaced, revised. It was like looking into a parallel universe where I'd never existed. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I shut the laptop, opened the suitcase. Beneath the shirts and paper-stiff jeans was a worn photo album, one of the last things I packed before I left. The leather cover had cracked over time. I hadn't touched it in years, but I'd kept it, quietly, like a backup drive for my soul. I flipped through the pages. There I was beside Dad, helping him carry lumber into the garage. There I was again, next to Mom in front of the first Green & Company storefront. I had built the website. I'd registered the domain. I'd created the logo on an old laptop at 2 a.m. after my shift at the diner. They used to call me the backbone. Now, I was a ghost. I pressed my fingertips to the photo. In the digital world, I was gone. But in ink and paper, I still existed. Someone had to remember. That's where it all started. Back in 2014, it was me who applied for the business tax ID. Me who filed the paperwork. Me who drove 3 hours to meet our first supplier because no one else could afford the gas. At the time, I told myself, it's family. Credit doesn't matter. But it does. It matters when the absence of it is used to destroy you. I opened my email archive, typed in Green & Company, and hit search. Hundreds of results flooded in. Contracts, product pitches, legal filings, every single one signed off with my name. M. Green. Proof that I wasn't just present. I was pivotal. I scrolled slowly, breathing heavier. I hadn't expected the rage to come like this. Quiet, controlled, like a fire that refused to roar, but burned hotter than anything I'd known. They always said I liked to be behind the scenes. They didn't mean it as a compliment. It was a strategy. Keep me helpful, humble, invisible. I was support, never spotlight. Useful until I wasn't. Looking back now, I should have never given them the password to the domain. I found the original site logo file tucked away in my drive. The file name wasn't even professional, just final_logo_Maddie_version3. The last piece of evidence clicked into place. I opened a new document, started typing a summary, dates, file names, email timestamps, screenshots, not for a lawsuit, not yet, but for the day someone asked for my side. I didn't know what was waiting for me next, but I knew what they had taken. They wanted me in the background, but I was the one who lit the damn stage. And I wasn't done unearthing the things they buried with my silence. The knock came just as I finished sorting the last folder into my drive. 3 sharp raps against the thin metal door. Not hesitant, not frantic, just entitled enough to sound familiar. I froze, not out of fear, but because part of me already knew. I walked to the door. My steps felt heavier than they should have. I looked through the peephole. My mother was standing there, hair plastered to her temples, makeup running in streaks like it was trying to escape her face. Beside her, my father, soaked through, collar limp, hands buried in the pockets of a jacket I bought him last Christmas. Rain pooled in the collar of my shirt. I hadn't realized I'd opened the door. They looked smaller somehow. "Can we come in?" she asked. Her voice didn't crack, it twisted. I didn't move. The door stayed half open. The rain kept falling. Dad stepped forward, eyes still fixed somewhere near his feet. "It's about family. We can fix this." The echo of Bloodsucker wasn't just in my ears. It was etched into the walls of my memory. Every syllable still raw. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. Not out of forgiveness, out of curiosity. They shuffled in like people visiting a hospital room they had once owned. Mom looked around, eyes catching on the cracked lamp, the water stain in the corner of the ceiling. She didn't comment. She didn't have to. I didn't offer coffee. I didn't ask them to sit. But they did anyway, on the edge of the bed, like guests in a stranger's grief. "We've been talking." Mom began, smoothing her skirt as if the wrinkles mattered. "There are some legal things. Just paperwork. Formalities." My father nodded like an extra in a play he hadn't read. "There's this inheritance issue," she added. "Grandpa's land. The title, it's under your name. Some clause. It's confusing." The words didn't matter. The tone did. It was the tone people use when they want something, but are pretending they don't. My phone buzzed. I picked it up, screen still lit from the document I had been reading earlier. A message from my brother. "Once she signs off, the property clears. Just keep her calm." I didn't react. My fingers stilled on the screen. I turned to them slowly, placed the phone face up on the table. Let them read it. They didn't speak. Mom opened her purse. A folder emerged. She laid it on the table like it weighed nothing. "Just look it over," she said. "It's all standard." I opened it. Partial deed, transfer, waiver of claim, all carefully phrased like a trap set with lace. My hands didn't shake this time. I closed the folder, pushed it gently back toward her. Why now? I asked. After everything? Mom blinked. It's complicated. No, I said. It's not. Her lips parted to protest. I lifted the phone, pressed play on the message. The sound of my brother's voice spilled into the room like poison. Once she signs off, the silence afterward felt like an exposed wire. You didn't come to fix anything, I said softly. You came to finish erasing me. They didn't deny it. They just sat there. Mom blinked, mascara bleeding down her cheek. Dad rubbed his hands like they itched with guilt, but didn't know where to scratch. I stood, walked to the window. Rain still dripped from the power lines, steady and uncaring. Funny thing, I said, without turning around. You all forgot to delete one thing. What's that? Dad asked, voice too quiet. My memory. And for the first time, I wasn't asking to be remembered. I was demanding not to be rewritten. They looked at me like I was the problem, but I was the only one holding their house together. The folder was still on the table, unopened, as if silence might change its contents. My parents sat stiffly across from me, the kind of stiff that comes from pride more than discomfort. Mom adjusted her sleeves like she was preparing for a job interview, not a confession. Dad kept glancing at the door, like he hadn't decided whether to walk out or own up. I stood slowly and walked to the drawer I kept locked, not out of secrecy, but because it was the last space in my life no one else had touched. I pulled out a thick file. The paper was worn soft from handling, labeled in my handwriting. House, Evergreen Street. I placed it on the table, next to theirs. Mom didn't reach for it. She watched me like she was waiting for a performance, like I might cry or beg or ask to be loved again. I opened the folder myself. That house you're living in, I said calmly, it's under a joint deed. Your names are there because I added them, but there's one signature missing. I slid the page forward. My father leaned closer. I saw the color drain from his face. Mine wasn't on the bottom line. Not yet. Mom opened her mouth, closed it, then said, we needed the credit. We wouldn't have qualified without. I know, I cut in. I made sure your names were on everything to protect your score. I paid the down payment. I handled the closing costs. I covered the first year of taxes. I did that because I believed in what we were building. Neither of them spoke. I pulled out another piece of paper. It was a copy of my removal from their emergency contact forms. Clinic records I'd requested after they used my insurance without telling me. You removed me from your medical records the same month I signed the final mortgage documents. I said, not even a phone call. Just erased. We didn't mean it like that, Dad mumbled. It was just paperwork. No, I said. It was a message. I heard it loud and clear. Looking back now, I should have known the day they stopped saying my name. Mom leaned forward, tone suddenly sharp. We did what was best for the family. I met her eyes. Then don't be surprised if I do the same, except this time, legally. Her jaw tensed. Are you threatening us? I reached into my folder again, pulled out a pen, held it between my fingers. I didn't sign. I didn't raise my voice. I simply placed their folder on top of mine and tore it in half. The sound echoed. Dad flinched. I tucked my file back into the drawer and turned the lock. You kicked me out of your house, I said, but you forgot I own the floor you're standing on. Mom stood, arms crossed. What do you want? To humiliate us? No, I said, walking to the door. I want boundaries. I want peace. And I want you out. They hesitated. I opened the door. Held it. Rain had started again. Light this time. Just enough to smear the chalk line of where we once stood as a family. They left. No words. No apologies. Just the rustling of old pride as it walked away, without a title. And I was done explaining my worth to people who only listened when they needed a signature. That night, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll through updates or pretend a podcast could fill the ache. I didn't reach for a book or a distraction. I just sat on the floor of my apartment, cross-legged, surrounded by the quiet I used to dread. Not anymore. In the corner of the room stood the tripod I bought nearly a year ago when I first toyed with the idea of launching a side business, maybe recording tutorials or product reviews, maybe teaching something useful. But I never used it. Every time I thought about filming, something inside me retreated. Not fear of failure, not even fear of being seen. Just that old, heavy thing I carried. The belief that if I spoke, no one would listen unless I was helping someone else. But something had changed. It wasn't rage pushing me anymore. Rage had passed through like a wildfire. What remained was sharper, quieter, the need to be heard, not approved of, not believed, just heard. I set the phone on the tripod, adjusted the angle. The red light blinked, ready. I didn't fix my hair. I didn't reapply anything. I was still in the sweatshirt I had cried in the night before, sleeves stretched and sleeves damp from memories I didn't ask to revisit. But I was ready. I titled the stream, A Daughter's Silence Ends Tonight. I pressed go live. The camera opened on me, dim lighting, tired eyes, raw truth. My name, I began, voice calm and even, is Maya Green. You don't know me, but some of you know my family. I watched the view count rise. 30, then 50, 100, and still rising. I was the girl behind the camera, behind the invoices, behind the payments, behind the silent sacrifices everyone forgot to mention during their toasts. I lifted a folder from beside me, rested it in my lap, opened it slowly like a sacred thing. This, I said, holding up the first page, is the receipt for the down payment on the house my parents live in. Paid. In. Full. By me. More pages followed. Bank statements. Tuition transfers. Copies of emails I sent to my brother's professors. Letters of recommendation I wrote late into the night. Rental agreements I co-signed because someone needed a signature, and I never asked for credit. I've been called selfish, bitter, toxic, I said, all by people whose lives were built on things I gave freely without asking for anything back. Comments began to appear. This is heartbreaking. This is my story too. You're not alone. But I kept going. I lifted one final item. A photo. Me, 18. In a white wedding dress. The one I never got to wear. That's mine, I said, holding it up. That's the dress my brother's fiancé wore last week at their wedding. I didn't loan it. I didn't offer it. They took it from the closet right before they threw out the rest of my things. A wave of nausea rose in my chest, but I didn't let it shake me. They called it unused fabric, like my story didn't matter, like I was just storage, Midstream, my phone buzzed. Call Mom. I let it ring. Then a text from my brother. Don't do this. You don't have to ruin everything. I looked into the camera. My voice didn't tremble. Everything, I said. You mean the fiction? I leaned forward. My name is Maya Green. I built the walls you live behind. I filled the gaps you pretended didn't exist. I kept the lights on. I kept the debt collectors away. I said yes even when I was falling apart. I inhaled deeply. The comments kept coming. This is bravery. They don't deserve you. Thank you for saying it out loud. You called me selfish. I said, you called me a ghost, a leech, a shadow, but ghosts don't pay mortgages, and leeches don't get approved for student loans. A tear pooled behind my eye, but I didn't let it fall. I wouldn't give them that scene. I was always there, until I stopped being useful. And when I finally said no, you said I stopped being family. I sat back slowly, steady. If I was never part of your story, I said, then let the world hear mine. I ended the stream. No music, no transitions, no fade out, just truth. No applause followed, but no apology was needed either. That's where it all started. And the story they buried was louder than the one they staged. By morning, my phone was melting with notifications. Buzz after buzz, screen lighting up like a slot machine. DMs, missed calls, tags. I didn't check them all. I didn't need to. A glance was enough to see the wildfire had started. Headlines poured in like floodwater. Daughter of Green and company breaks silence. Viral stream exposes years of buried sacrifice. Maya Green tells the story no one else would. My name was everywhere now, attached to truths they spent decades burying under parties, press releases, and performative family photos. Some of the messages came from strangers. Others came from people I hadn't heard from in over a decade. A few were family, cousins who once copied my homework, aunts who never replied to holiday cards, now suddenly shocked by what they saw. I had no idea. We were never told. This explains so much. I believed them in the same way you believe a neighbor who, after the sirens fade, says, I always thought something was off. They didn't know because they didn't want to. The call came while I was brushing my teeth. The screen lit up with a number I barely recognized, and I almost let it ring out. But something in me paused. Mr. Halvorsen, my grandfather's attorney. I hadn't spoken to him since the funeral, back when grief had its own script, and everyone pretended it didn't leave bruises. His voice was slower than I remembered, but still sharp like a knife wrapped in velvet. I saw the stream. Maya, he said, your grandfather would have been proud. I didn't know what to say. I let the silence hold the weight. There's something you need to know, he continued. Something regarding the estate. Specifically, a clause in the trust. It was written by your grandfather years before his passing. I waited. It states that all properties and holdings tied to Green and Company, including the lake house, the commercial parcels, and the legacy fund, would revert to the city unless your name, Maya Green, remained on the title. My toothbrush stilled in midair. I leaned against the sink, toothpaste foam, drying slowly. Wait, I said, what do you mean unless my name remained? It was his condition. Halvorsen replied, your father knew. So did your brother. They've spent the last several years trying to quietly rewrite the documentation. They failed. I stared at my reflection, water running in the background. You're saying they needed me all along. Yes, he said, but not as family, as function. And there it was. I had been essential, but never valued, never seen. That's where it all started. He paused, then added, "There's something else." I braced. "Years ago," he said carefully, "your father once told me, if my son fails, at least we have Maya. She'll always pick up the slack." That sentence stuck to me like mildew in a sealed room. Not praised, not chosen, just a safety net, a backup, a fallback option they never intended to honor, only to use. Not the heir, just the insurance. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My silence said more than my voice could have. "Would you like me to forward you the documents?" Halvorsen asked. "Yes," I said quietly. "And anything else you think I should see?" An hour later, his email arrived. No dramatic subject line. No preface. Just an attachment labeled, "For Maya." I hesitated before opening it. I could feel my heart thudding, not fast, just deep. The screen lit up with a dimly lit video. My grandfather, sitting in his old armchair, the one with the frayed armrest and the worn leather cushion. His voice was raspier than I remembered, a whisper with weight. "Maya," he began, "you were always the spine. They just never looked low enough to see who held them upright." And that's when it broke me, not with sobs, with stillness, the kind of stillness that settles when your body finally believes what your heart has suspected for years. I had carried everything, not just responsibilities, not just emotional labor, but expectations, guilt, silence, generations of blind inheritance layered over my name like sediment. And now, finally, here was one voice, the one voice I didn't realize I still needed, telling me the truth. I watched the video again, then again. It wasn't just a man's final words. It was an apology I never asked for, but always deserved. That's where the truth lived, not in the statements they made in boardrooms, not in the family newsletters, but in the quiet corners they never thought I'd check. I called Halvorsen back. "Keep my name on everything," I said, "but from now on, every brick that bears it will tell the truth." He was silent for a breath. Then, understood. I closed the laptop slowly, like sealing something sacred. And then I whispered to myself, not as a vow, not even as defiance, but as a realization. I wasn't the backup plan. I was the foundation. And they built their lies over me. And now I'm rebuilding, not with revenge, with record, not with noise, with legacy. And when the walls began to crumble, they finally looked down and saw whose name was carved beneath the cornerstone. By noon, my cousin sent me a screenshot of the latest family reunion post. It was the same familiar scene. Everyone standing on the deck of my uncle's lake house, wearing color-coordinated polos and that practiced look of artificial warmth. I counted faces automatically. I knew where I had once stood, right between my brother and Darlene, smiling like I belonged. But this time, that space held nothing but a gray silhouette with one word beneath it: unavailable. I didn't feel anger. I felt precision. Erased. Neatly. Publicly. There was no mistake. No misunderstanding. It was surgical. Chosen. I had not opted out. I had not declined the invitation. They simply decided I was easier to delete than to reckon with. That's when the emails from clients started, one after another. Is this true? We're trying to understand what's going on. We didn't realize you were no longer part of the company. The company's Instagram, the one I co-built from the ground up, had turned into a battleground overnight. Comments piling up, old posts quietly archived, recent photos missing their captions. Someone had tried to backpedal without covering their tracks. And then there were the clips. My live stream, my voice, my documents. I hadn't planned to go viral. I wasn't chasing clicks. But truth, once released, doesn't check with PR departments or family group chats. It just runs. I didn't know it yet, but that moment was a fault line. My phone rang again. My brother. I didn't answer, but the voicemail preview lit up on the screen. You've said enough. Let's fix the image. We'll give you a public thanks. We'll restore your name. As if my name had been broken, as if it belonged to them to fix. I called him back. He picked up too fast, like he'd been rehearsing. We can do a post together, he began. Something clean, neutral, just. My name never needed fixing, I said. Yours does. Silence. Then a breath, sharp, like I'd hit him across the face. I didn't wait for a reply. I hung up. That's where it all started. Later that day, I received an email from a network producer, a national morning show, in-studio interview, prime time. We think your story could help others. I read it twice, then again. Then I stared at it for 2 hours. It wasn't the offer that unsettled me. It was the idea of being packaged as content. So I replied, thank you, but I'm not here to be your primetime trauma. Instead, I opened my laptop. I bought a domain, mayagreentruth.com. I uploaded everything, the documents, the emails, the timestamps, the photos, the PDF scans, the ledger breakdowns, not to prove anything, not to beg for sympathy, but to preserve it, a living archive. No hashtags, no black and white headshots, just fact after fact, lined up in plain HTML. I built it with the same care I once gave the business we started together. Only this time, I built it for clarity, not approval. That's all I'd ever wanted. I titled each page with dates. I linked every file with a source. I let the documents speak. No commentary. No emotional overlays. Some truths don't need storytelling. They just need to exist. Looking back now, I wish I had done it years earlier. But I wasn't the same Maya back then, and I didn't know what was waiting for me next. What I did know, I had stopped asking for a seat at a table that had always required my silence as currency. Instead, I filled out the estate paperwork, form after form, each one a quiet act of justice. No press, no drama, just clean, notarized documentation. No confrontation, no lawsuit, just law. When the clerk at the title office asked how I wanted to be listed, I didn't hesitate. Maya L. Green, I said, put it in full. She looked up. You want your full middle name on file? Yes, I said, every letter. Because every letter mattered. Every inch of my identity was earned, not inherited. I didn't need a spotlight. I needed a mirror that didn't distort me. And if that meant being unavailable in a photo designed to lie, so be it. They removed me from their image. So I made my own. And in that final reflection, I no longer saw what they tried to erase. I saw what I had finally become. The envelope was plain, off-white, the edges slightly worn, as if it had been handled too many times before finally reaching me. There was no return address, just my name, Maya Green, written in a wavering hand that felt both familiar and distant, the kind of handwriting that once labeled birthday cards and school forms, back when names still felt like hope. Inside was a single page, a printed hospital memo. Patient Margaret Green. Condition terminal. Requested contact Maya Green. No other details. No apology. No context. Just the fact of her dying. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp or crumble or feel the need to. I simply stared at the paper for a moment, long enough to read it, then longer still to understand that I had nothing left to carry for her. I folded it in half, then again, and again, until it was small enough to disappear inside my palm, like all the other moments I'd been expected to absorb and silence. Outside, the lake was still. Wind brushed across the dock like a soft question. A pair of ducks drifted along the surface, entirely unaware of what I was holding. They didn't care. They didn't know. Life, for them, simply moved forward, always forward. I watched them until the paper in my hand stopped feeling sharp. Looking back now, I think part of me had expected the letter. Maybe not the format or the timing, but the moment itself. The inevitability of it. After all, everything she avoided saying had always found a way to arrive, eventually sideways, veiled, and signed. I made tea, the same chamomile blend I'd bought from the small shop in town, the one where the woman behind the counter always complimented my earrings and asked how my garden was doing. I carried the mug out to the porch. My porch. The one I bought with my name on every form and deed. Not hers, not theirs, mine. It was a quiet afternoon. A Saturday, I think. One of those slow-moving days that used to ache with absence. When I used to fill the silence with overthinking. Back then, Saturdays felt like proof that something was missing. But now, the silence didn't ache. It exhaled. Now, the stillness felt full. That's when it came back to me, her voice, like it always did when her name re-entered my life uninvited. I was 19, home for spring break. I had just accepted a leadership scholarship. It was a moment I'd been proud of briefly. She cornered me in the kitchen, voice low, cutting. "You'll die alone," she said, "if you don't stop acting like you're better than the rest of us." I didn't cry then either. I just nodded like I always did. I had learned early that silence was safer than contradiction. But sitting here now, tea in hand, porch bathed in golden light, the lake reflecting everything I had reclaimed, I finally knew she was wrong. I hadn't died alone. I had lived alone. And for the first time, I was truly alive, on my own terms, in my own space, in a life I didn't have to shrink myself to fit into. That's where it all started. I walked inside and pulled out a sheet of paper. No laptop, no voice note, no blinking cursor waiting for perfection. Just ink and truth. I wrote a single sentence. I once lived there, but no one ever saw me. That was enough. No return address. No signature. Only closure. I folded the page neatly and placed it in a fresh envelope. Then I slid it into the stack of outgoing mail, not because I wanted it delivered, but because I wanted it gone. The children next door ran across the grass just then, laughter spilling like sunlight into my yard. I watched them chase one another barefoot, joy flickering across their faces, unbothered by the weight of inheritance or apology. And it reminded me of something I hadn't felt in a long time, what it was like to run, not away from something, but towards something mine. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. But for once, I didn't need to. Inside, above the mantel, hung a single photo, a black and white print I had framed last fall. Me, alone, smiling, hair wild in the wind, boots muddy, shoulders relaxed. No one else in the frame. No forced smiles or matching colors. No hands guiding mine. It wasn't a selfie. It wasn't posed. It was taken by a stranger on a hiking trail who had said, "You look like you belong to this place." It was the first photo I'd printed in over 10 years. Just me. Seen. Real. Later that evening, I opened the inbox tied to my website. No threats. No denials. No family corrections. Only stories. Women from all over writing to say they had saved the stream, that it helped them leave, that it gave them words when their mouths couldn't move, that someone had finally said the thing they were never allowed to say. You gave me language. You gave me permission. You gave me peace. And that's all I had ever wanted for any of us, for someone to feel less alone inside their silence. Looking back now, I realize it had never been about getting her apology. I was never waiting for that. I was waiting to no longer need it. Sometimes closure doesn't come dressed in forgiveness. Sometimes it doesn't come wrapped in tears or phone calls or perfect endings. Sometimes closure is quiet. It's a porch, a cup of tea, a paper folded small. It's deciding to walk forward, not because you've healed completely, but because you've stopped waiting to be acknowledged by people who chose not to look. Have you ever stopped waiting for someone to say sorry and started building peace without them? Tell me in the comments. I'm listening. And if this story found you in a quiet place, subscribe for more truths that don't beg to be believed, just heard.